Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. This afternoon, I thought I would talk about a very maybe difficult subject to talk about. It's subtle as the transcendent element in Buddhism, the unconditioned, and how that relates into the overall philosophy, and how that compares to the transcendent element in other systems, which generally takes the form of some kind of a God figure. This is something that comes up on occasion when there are interfaith sort of programs and gatherings. Somebody suggests trying to be inclusive and ecumenical. Someone suggests, why don't we all silently pray to God as we understand Him? And trouble-making Buddhists will go, excuse me. There is no God figure in Buddhism. But Buddhism is not atheist in the generally understood sense either. Atheists are, in the modern incarnation of the philosophy anyway, atheists are materialist, and Buddhism is not materialist. Buddhism does recognize a spiritual dimension and transcendent element, but it doesn't personalize it. There's a story about Ajahn when he was visiting England. He was approached by some Anglican clergyman who asked him a rather cheeky question. He asked him, "Do you think Buddhist prayers reach all the way to God?" And Ajahn gave as good as he got. He came back with, actually they go much further than that. The concept of a God as a creator is something that was definitely known in ancient India in various forms and different schools of thought. There's creation stories in the Vedas, and by the time of the Upanishads, the concept of Brahman was holding sway, which is a theologically more advanced or subtle idea of God. In the pre-Buddhist literature, there is a Brahma as a deity, and in some versions as the supreme deity. Brahma is the word is a masculine noun, and it identifies a person, a supreme being. But Brahman is a neuter noun, and it means a supreme principle. It's really non-personalized. It may be in some ways analogous to something like the Tao from Chinese philosophy. But it's still a concept that doesn't fit with Buddhism because of the still sense of substantializing the transcendental in some way and not taking it beyond the realm of cause and effect. Well, this is I think, the principal incompatibility of any concept of God, no matter how refined, like the concept of Brahman, or the apophatic Godhead of some Western theology. The incompatibility of these concepts with Buddhist thought is because if this God concept is conceived as a first cause, then it's not transcendent. It's still within the realm of cause and effect. If it's acting as a cause, then it's not beyond the realm of causality. It's not truly the unconditioned. Western thought, there's been, from pre-Christian times, from Greek philosophy, there was the idea of a first cause, which to the Greeks and their successors seemed like a logical necessity. That things happen, there's a cause and effect. So you have to trace the chain back, there has to be a first cause. The prime mover, which of course the Christians identified with God, the Creator. But Buddhism hasn't accepted this because, again, it's still an exception to causality. Rather, Buddhist thought has inclined towards the idea that the conditioned world is without a beginning. There is no first cause. In other words, if you go back in time to any moment X, there'll always be a moment X minus 1. And if you go to X minus 1, there'll be an X minus 2. No matter how far back in time you go, there's always a prior moment. There's no beginning. This isn't something, by the way, this isn't something that the Buddha explicitly taught. Rather, he said that the beginning of things is not to be apprehended, cannot be known. So he left the question in a sense open, but it's been the explicit statements in later texts, in the commentaries in the Abhidhamma, that the universe is beginningless. And I think this is held by all schools of Buddhism. Some people find that difficult. They balk at the idea of beginninglessness. The mind can somehow more easily imagine endlessness than beginninglessness. But, there's no logical reason to exclude the possibility of beginninglessness. Just because we have trouble visualizing it doesn't in any way invalidate it. In fact, if you accept the principle or the axiom of nothing arising without a cause, then beginningless becomes a logical necessity. In the Digha Nikaya, there is a explanation of how theistic religions arise. At the beginning of a new world system, there'll be an empty Brahma palace will arise as part of the unfolding of the new world. And a being will arise by the force of his own karma. He'll arise in that palace. And he's Brahma, Mahabrahma, magnificent, long-lived, glorious, radiant, very high karmic result to be born as a Mahabrahma. And he's alone for a long period of time in this world, this new world that's arising. And he feels the wish for companions. And at some point, other beings, by the force of their karma, arise into this world, into his presence. And he believes that he has created them by his wish, because first he wished for companions, and then here they are. And he tells them that, I have created you, and they believe it. And this becomes the God and his angels, right? This is the first manifestation in the world. And then after some long period of time, some of these lesser Brahmas decease from that realm and are reborn as humans. And they practice yoga, their austerities in the desert, what have you, and they develop psychic powers, and they see visions of their past life. And they see the Brahma world with Brahma, Mahabrahma, expounding on how he created all things. And it's a genuine vision, but they misinterpret it to this degree that they take it as the Brahma statements as literally true. And they go out and teach, and they become founders of theistic religions. Because there are beings in existence that are higher than Brahma. This is something that in the Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha goes up to the realm of one of these Brahma gods, whom he had in. It goes in the backstory in the commentary, explains that the Buddha had some ancient karmic connection with this being. That in many aeons ago, he had been a pupil of this being when they were both humans. And who's now the Brahma was a powerful yogi, and the Bodhisattva was his student. And so he feels a connection to this being and wants to help him, because he's fallen into wrong view, and he has believed himself to be the creator of all things. And the Buddha appears in his presence and challenges him. And first, before he enters his presence, some of the lesser Brahmas, his entourage, accost the Buddha and tell him, Samana, you should bow down before Mahabrahma, Mahabrahma. He is the All-Father, the creator of all things, the decider, the judge. And go on, a list of these titles. And it all sounds that little paragraph all sounds very Old Testament. There's the thundering nature of this all-powerful Brahma. The Buddha's just, be it as it may, I'm going to speak to him. He challenges the Brahma to after some discourse, back and forth, kind of philosophical discourse, he then challenges him to a contest. He says, I can disappear from your vision, but you cannot disappear from mine. And the Brahma disappears, and the Buddha sees him immediately with his divine eye. He can't disappear from the Buddha. The Buddha disappears from the Brahma by transferring himself to a higher level, next plane of existence up, which the Brahma, conceiving himself to be the supreme being of all creation, he has no concept of there being anything higher. So of course he can't find the Buddha. The commentary then puts in a bit of comedy to this episode, by having the Brahma attempting to disappear in various ways and failing, and finally in desperation he flees from his palace and hides crouching down behind a bush. I think he can hide that way, and his entourage come around laughing at him and saying, are you the Brahma, the mighty Brahma? This is the comic flourish of the commentary. But the concept here that's important, that's to be noted, is that the concept of Brahma, the great Brahma, was accepted by many people, perhaps most people in India at the time, as the supreme deity, as the God figure. And the Buddha here is not only challenging the Brahma, but demonstrating that there are actually realms above that of Brahma. So the concept of Brahma as God is not supreme. But there are several realms above those of the first level Brahmas. But all of these are any realm of existence whatsoever is conditioned, meaning this is a very important concept to grasp. Sankhata means it's subject to cause and effect, so that anything which arises in mundane existence doesn't arise randomly or arbitrarily. It arises as a result of cause and effect. There is no randomness or arbitrariness. This is a conditioned world. This concept is tied into the concept of not self, of emptiness, because there are no substantial standalone entities that exist from their own side. There's only occurrences that are the result of other occurrences. So momentary nodes in a network of cause and effect. So it ties into the idea of impermanence or transitoriness as well. Because of these causes and effects are constantly shifting and changing, and nothing persists for more than a moment. And the concept of dukkha, or imperfection or unsatisfying suffering, is because these things are constantly under strain of push and pull, these various causal impulses. So nothing is really a discrete, standalone, self-existent entity. That's a false concept. There's only cause and effect. And the closest thing to an actual entity is the momentary Dhamma, which is an abstraction. I like Sherbatsky's translation of Dhamma as a point instant. A point in mathematics is the smallest unit of space. It's 0 dimensions. It's a location with 0 dimensions. And an instant is the same in time. It's a localized point of time without any duration. So a Dhamma is a point instant of reality. So one way of seeing this conditioned existence or samsaric existence is manifestation of any kind, is a kind of brokenness. It's an imperfection. It's a momentary shattering of universal potential into some kind of discrete object. In modern terms, it's the collapse of the wave function. The wave function being the universal potentiality, the full emptiness or sunyata. So this whole mass of suffering, this conditioned existence, other schools of thought in India and in the West attribute it to a first cause, which is a natural human, an impulse of the human mind, a kind of desire to close up the system. And we see that in any kind of mythologies and primitive religions. There's always a creation story. But the Buddhist philosophy doesn't allow for that. It goes, there is no ultimate first instant. You can't go back in time and find a first moment. This is just the nature of samsara. Beings are wandering in samsara because of their ignorance of not seeing the whole picture, so they're caught in it. And the samsara is created constantly, momentarily, by our desire and our karma. It's something we do. Whereas the unconditioned is always kept completely separate from that. It's that which is not created, not made, not born, not dying. Asankata, the unconditioned. This is something that initially attracted me to the Theravada version of Buddhism when I started reading up on it in my long gone youth, in the days when rocks were soft. I had the idea that the Theravada presentation of the unconditioned was the most pure, purely transcendent. There's no kind of compromise with mundane reality. If you have a God, no matter how refined and subtle the idea of a God is, and some of the Indian and Christian theologists get very subtilized ideas of God, there's still an element of conditionality in there, because he's still, if he's the first cause, he's the creator, he's still doing something, he's still interacting with the conditioned world. It's not completely transcendent. There's some implications of this vision of the transcendent. One is when we're thinking about the laws of karma, which is one of the important aspects of cause and effect. The laws of karma are not in any way a judgment. As we find in theistic religions, there's a judgment by a god. God rewards and punishes. There can be people approaching the idea of karma, they can carry that over in their thinking, but it's not like that. It's more closer to the idea of a natural law, like the conservation of momentum or something like that. It's a balancing factor built into the fabric of the universe. It's just natural. It's just a natural result. So in some ways this is actually, it is much harder to escape, and it's more, in a sense, it's more ruthless than the idea of a judging God, because if you have a judging God, there's a chance of forgiveness, right? He can have mercy on the sinner. Karma has no mercy. Karma is just a natural process. It's like the law of gravity. There's no mercy. You fall off a roof, gravity's not going to have mercy on you. So it becomes, just a purely playing out of natural law. And when we're thinking about the unconditioned, it's very difficult and subtle to grasp, and it's probably anything you could say about it is going to be in some sense wrong, because you're trying to frame in words that which is literally beyond concept, beyond speech. So the Buddha actually, in all his teachings, he actually spoke very little about Nibbana or the unconditioned. And you can go through all the discourses and you can gather all the references. There's not that many. And usually when he spoke of it, it was either in one of two ways, either in strictly negative terms, like saying what it is not. And probably the clearest passages in the Udana, where he says, there is, O monks, an unconditioned, asankata. There is the unborn, the undying, the uncreated, the unmade. Because if there were not, there would be no escape from the made, the created, the born, the dying. But I declare there is an escape from these things, so there is the unconditioned. it's more clear even in the Pali that the way he's speaking is entirely in negatives. It's like ruling out that it isn't born, it doesn't die, it isn't made, it doesn't change. But it's all negatives. Amata. He doesn't say it's eternal, which would be nitya. He says it's undying or it doesn't die, amata. So it's a negative. Because even the concepts of space and time are within samsaric dimension and don't apply to nibbana. So you can't call it eternal because that's a duration in time. And the other way he speaks of it is in poetic metaphors, imagery. Most commonly the far shore, the secure refuge, or the island. These images are in no way meant to be taken literally. They're just a way to move the mind, to evoke something in the mind. So we have this pair of words in Pali, sankhata and asankhata, the conditioned and the unconditioned. And I've been using the word transcendent. The Pali I'm thinking of when I say that is lokuttara. There's another pair of words is lokaya and lokuttara. Loka is the world. And depending on context, it could have different connotations. But generally it means the mundane, ordinary world. And loki is a worldly, or to do with the world. And lokuttara is beyond the world. It's loka, the world, and tara is like a peak, a mountain peak, or summit. And ut means beyond. So it's beyond the world, that which is transcendent of the world. Lokuttara is used in a way that is maybe a little broader than asankhata, because in some contexts it includes things like the mind in jhana is called lokuttara, but it would still be, the mind in jhana would still be sankhata. But in general there's the idea of the world now which is beyond the world. So the mundane and the transcendent. We could also say that Buddhism is not atheistic because it does have space for gods to exist. But the nature of the gods, as understood in Buddhism, devas and brahmas, is different than in other systems, because there are no immortal beings. The devas and the brahmas may be very long-lived, but they still have an end to their lifespan. They still come into existence and pass out of existence. They're not all powerful, and they're not in any sense creators. They're just other actors in the samsaric drama. It's just another station of rebirth. It's just another result of karma. When devas and brahmas are conceived as at times having interactions with the human level realm. There's many stories, particularly of Saka coming down and sometimes making mischief, sometimes doing good deeds. He's a very complex character. Brahmas more rarely, but we do have, for example, Brahma Sahampati coming to beg the Buddha on bended knee to teach. So this was a being from well beyond this earthly plane who manifested to beg the Buddha to teach. So they do have a possibility of interaction between the realms, but they're not considered to be the creators of this realm, and they're not all powerful even within the limits of this existence. And they're still subject to defilement. They're not purified beings. They still have defilements. The sensual level devas still have defilements of sense desire, ill will, and all the rest of it. The Brahmas are beyond sense desire and ill will, but they still have desire for being and false view and pride. So there are no perfected beings other than a Buddha or an Arahant, and those are beings that are on their way out. They don't, when their time span has done, they don't take rebirth again. They cease manifestation. And this raises a natural question that comes up, as was asked by Satyaka, the Brahma, the wanderer, to the Buddha. He asked him, what is the fate of the Tathagata after death? The way he phrased it was, does the Tathagata exist after death? And the Buddha answered, that does not fit the case. So he didn't exactly say no, but yes or no. He said that does not fit the case. So then Satyaka says, does the Tathagata not exist after death? That does not fit the case. Does he both exist and not exist? Does not fit the case. Does he neither exist nor not exist? Does not fit the case. And so, of course, Satyaka was completely baffled, and the Buddha said, let me give you a metaphor. We're sitting beside this fire. If the fire goes out, and I asked you, did it go to the north, to the east, to the west, to the south? You would have to say it does not fit the case. In other words, it's a question that makes no sense to even ask. And this is, in the context, if you understand the context of Indian thought, it becomes even a little more powerful, because this four poles, the quadrilemma, or the tetralemma, four poles of Indian logic, something either is not, both is and is not, or neither is nor is not. This is different than the Greek logic, which we've inherited in the West, which has, it's only binary. It's either A or B, is or is not. And there's no kind of, there's actually in Aristotelian logic, there's a law of the excluded middle. Something either is or is not. They don't allow a possibility of both is and is not, or neither is nor is not. But Indian logic did have this four poles. And so this is very specific reference the Buddha is making to existing thought systems. And he's saying, this doesn't fit into any of the logical positions that you can take. So this question is ill-founded. You can't ask, does a Buddha exist after death? Or does he not exist? Or both exist or not exist? Or neither exist nor not exist? None of these make sense. Because these are all to do with within the realm of logic and reason, which is bounded by samsara or conditionality, and cannot penetrate beyond that. It can only have mastery within its own realm. It can't approach or grasp anything outside of that, which is nibbana or the unconditioned. The closest approach to this way of thinking I've seen in the West is Eastern Orthodox Christianity with their apophatic view of God. Apophatic means it cannot be expressed or spoken of. Whereas the Western Church had developed an elaborate theology about the attributes of God. The Eastern Church rejected all of that, said you can't, the highest Godhead, you cannot postulate anything about it. But they still allow that it's the creator, so there's still a dilemma there from the Buddhist point of view. It's not perfectly unconditioned, asankata. So I'll just kind of wrap it up, saying that this is the important distinction in Buddhist thought, is between the conditioned and the unconditioned. And the whole thrust of the practice is for realization of the unconditioned. And if we're not moving towards the unconditioned, all we're doing is playing about. We're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. So it's something always to be kept in, at least in the back of your mind in the practice, is that one is attempting to realize the unconditioned.
Anamayam Dhammakataya Sadhu Karam Dharamase Sadhu 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 Anumodani.